All right, let's get right into it. We're going to explore a really tricky subject at the heart of Freemasonry. What happens when that sacred bond of brotherhood runs smack into corruption?
You know, from the outside looking in, most people think Freemasonry is all about secrets. The big assumption is that you protect your brothers, no matter what. But what if that no matter what means turning a blind eye to real corruption? That's the core question, isn't it? Does a vow of silence really outweigh a duty to the truth? Well, we're going to dig into that.
So here's how we're going to break it down. First, we'll bust that big myth about silence. Then, we'll get into what a Mason's real obligation is and walk through the proper steps for reporting something. We'll also touch on something called the clean hands doctrine, which is super important. And finally, we'll see why integrity just has to come before secrecy.
Okay, so first things first, let's talk about the elephant in the room. This idea that Masons have this unbreakable code of silence, even when something seriously wrong is happening. Honestly, this one belief causes so much confusion.
And here's where we see this huge gap between the myth and the actual reality. The popular myth is, you keep a brother's secrets at all costs. But the truth? Masonic law is actually crystal clear. Members have a constitutional obligation, that's a big word, to report corruption. It's not just a suggestion, it's a fundamental requirement.
Okay, so if the main obligation isn't just to stay quiet, then what is it? What's a Mason actually supposed to do when they see something that's clearly wrong? Well, the good news is there's a very specific framework for exactly that.
The official term for this kind of behavior is un-Masonic conduct. And we're not talking about petty squabbles or disagreements here. No. This is about serious actions that actually harm the entire lodge, things like financial corruption or just flat-out breaking the organization's own rules.
And to be more specific, we're talking about really serious stuff, like somebody misusing lodge funds, or straight-up embezzlement, or just completely ignoring the bylaws. I mean, these are major breaches of trust, and you just can't look the other way.
And this quote just hits the nail on the head. It perfectly captures the ethical dilemma. Staying silent when you know there's corruption isn't brotherly love, it's complicity. Think about that. You're not helping a brother, you're helping to damage the very thing you're both a part of. It's a betrayal of everyone.
So if you see something, what's the right way to handle it? Well, Freemasonry is a very structured organization, right? So there's an official process. You can't just go out and start making public accusations. You've got to follow the chain of command.
And it's a pretty straightforward two-step process. Step 1, you report it to the head of your local lodge, who's called the Worshipful Master. Now, what if the master doesn't do anything? Or worse, what if he's the one involved? Well, that's when you go to step 2. You escalate it to the District Deputy Grand Master, who's basically the Grand Master's representative for your area.
I love this analogy our source material uses. When you follow this process and report corruption, you're not a snitch or a troublemaker. You're acting like the immune system of your lodge. You're literally protecting the body from a disease that's trying to harm it from the inside.
But, and this is a huge but, this reporting process isn't meant to be used as a weapon. It's not for personal attacks. There's a really critical ethical check in place here, and it's called the clean hands doctrine. And it all comes down to one thing: your motivation.
See, the whole point of reporting isn't to ruin someone's life or destroy their reputation. The goal is restoration, not destruction. The idea is to fix the problem, to heal the lodge, and get its integrity back on track.
And this really breaks it down for us. There's a massive difference between reporting in good faith and reporting with malice. Good faith means your only motive is to preserve the craft and its integrity. But using this process as a weapon for your own personal vendettas or to play politics, that's a complete abuse of the system.
All right, let's pull all these threads together. When you really think about it, and you weigh this idea of secrecy against the actual constitutional duty of integrity, well, the right path becomes pretty darn clear, doesn't it?
Because at the end of the day, what is Freemasonry? At its absolute core, it's a system of morality. All the symbols, the allegories, the rituals, they're all there for one reason: to teach and reinforce a moral and ethical way to live.
And that brings us to this really powerful closing thought. If you strip away that morality, if you let it erode because people are afraid to stand up to what's wrong, then what's left? All those symbols and traditions, they become meaningless. All you have is the veil, an empty shell with nothing of substance behind it.
You know, even though we've been talking specifically about Freemasonry, this whole issue is universal. It really makes you think, right? It leads to a much bigger question for all of us. What is the true foundation of any group we trust? Whether it's a company, a charity, or even just a group of friends. What does it really take to build and keep that trust? That's something to chew on.